Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show. Today we take a well-deserved break from Brexit to visit the sun-kissed beaches of the Indian Ocean. There is one problem with this island paradise. The people have been replaced by an Air Force base. For that has been the fate of the Chagosians, Her Majesty's subjects cleared from their homeland half a century ago to make way for American service personnel. Over 2 programmes, we consider how this bitter legacy of colonialism still impacts today. In this show, we look at the human cost of a people cleared from their islands. In the second part, we examine the political and legal implications for the United Kingdom, standing condemned last month before the International Court of Justice, and now facing a full United Nations debate on the issue. But first to Alex, with your tweets, your messages and your emails.
Well, first up is ISM, who makes a very interesting point. She says, hubby tuned in to watch this at 7:30 a.m. and all we got was Trump, Trump, Trump. No mention of what happened to the Alex Salmond Show. Well, ISM, I did actually nourish the suspicion, knowing my relationship with the President of the United States, that perhaps he'd broken off his talks with Chairman Kim to knock off the first broadcast edition of our show. Well, knowing Donald, anything's possible. Dr. Kaz says, fantastic show tonight. My son is half German from the East. I believe Scotland and Germany have extremely strong ties. I consider Germany my second home. And 7 Anthea says, very good show tonight. Alec, as always, your guests are interesting and informative. Keep up the good work. Well, we intend to, Anthea. And Lynn Filneson says, best show yet. Elmer Brock cheered my heart. And James Wilson was so right in all he said. Scottish independence gets nearer the closer we get to Brexit. And Mary White says, I've always thought that Theresa May was a closet Brexiteer who played both sides to get into the top job. And Jim Petrie concludes by saying, hi Eck, hopefully you can run a show from here in Arbroath next April to celebrate the declaration of Scottish independence 700 years on, and signs it off Saorsa, which is Scots Gaelic for freedom.
No country likes to be reminded of its murky past, but this is exactly what has happened to the UK, standing in the dock of the International Court of Justice over the last few years, culminating in a hostile judgment last month. At the heart of the case, Britain as a colonial power stood condemned of a sustained track record of shame and injustice towards the families of 2,000 people dispossessed from their Indian Ocean home in the 1960s and 70s. It's a shame that looms large in the history of the Chagos Islands, an archipelago whose tiny size and vast distance from everywhere amplifies the degree of injustice suffered by its people. These people were cleared from their islands by a mixture of blackmail and bullying, and by authorities who had their fate entrusted to their care. They are injustices dating back to when the British acquired the islands from France as part of the larger colony of Mauritius and forced slaves from Mozambique and Madagascar to work on colonial coconut plantations. They are injustices which continue to this day, with third-generation Chagosians who have made their home in the United Kingdom now threatened with deportation as part of the continuing hostile environment approach. In this show, we get an insight into how this sad story has affected families and how last month's international court decision has raised hopes that one day the Chagosians might yet return to their ancestral home. Alex speaks first to Isabel Charlo of the Chagos Islanders movement.
Isabel, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you.
There's quite a strong community of Chagosians in the UK, mostly gathered round Crawley, near Gatwick Airport, where people came originally. How many people are in that community, and how did it come about?
At the moment, we are around 3,000 or more in the UK, but why Crawley, why Gatwick Airport? It's because the first group that came, they came to Gatwick Airport, they landed there and stayed for a couple of days. Then they were introduced to the council of Crawley, and it was them who had the duty to look for accommodation for them. As we are family orientated in the community, when others come, we will just say, okay, you can come to my house, come and stay over. So this is how it happened, because we just still wanted to keep that bond, family bond.
That's very interesting. Like many immigrant communities, once there was a bridgehead established, people grouped together because it was people they knew, their friends, people from the same background. Now, Isabel, you represent the Chagos Island movement. I mean, what are the aims of your organisation?
Our aim is for the governments, both sides, Mauritius, British government and the USA, to recognise Chagosian worth and to give us back our island.
Now, Isabel, you're second generation Chagosian. You've never been to the islands, you weren't born there. I've had the pleasure of meeting your father, Louis, who was born in the Chagos Islands. But is it really the case that people like yourself still regard these atolls in the middle of the Indian Ocean as your islands?
Of course, definitely, yes. It's my heritage. My dad left this for me. This is our culture, our history. It's made of this island. We just need to know our identity. My identity, and as many other Chagosian, we believe that it's been stolen away from us.
But the British government's argument all these years ago in the 1960s was the people they cleared, a word we know in Scotland from the Highland clearances, incidentally, but they cleared from the islands. They were only itinerant workers. They'd only been there perhaps a few centuries, but they weren't native to the islands. Is there nothing in that British argument? They say you were better off in Mauritius.
It's a big lie, because the British government never looked back after us. They just dump us in Mauritius. We, as a people, as a community, we have a voice for ourselves. We just want to fight for this injustice that they did to our family.
Again, the British argument is that they gave Mauritius money to look after the Chagosians when they went to Mauritius back in the late 60s, early 70s. Did the community see any of these funds?
The community never received any full benefit of the money. The British government should have looked after us to find out how was the money spent, how we were doing in Mauritius, but we were neglected. We were just abandoned and being forgotten by British government. Mauritius did whatever they wanted with us.
But some of the Chagosians came to Gatwick, as you've explained, and established a community. But even though it's not home, and it doesn't have anything like the many, many attractions of these beautiful islands in the Indian Ocean, aren't there advantages in the community being in Crawley? I mean, access to health services, opportunities, educational opportunities. Aren't there advantages of the 3,000-strong community being in this country as opposed to in an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean?
Home is home, and we are missing that. We just came here for a purpose. Our fight started in Mauritius, and we want to end it here in the UK. We seized this opportunity when they gave us British passport. We used this to come here so that the world can know our struggle. And we are still campaigning to raise awareness of our community. We had to go and sleep outside in London last year for people to know about us. We are very poor. We are very small, but we are ready to go to any level to show the world that we are determined to go back home.
But Isabel, the Foreign Office organise trips. Every year they organise trips back to the island. Is that not something that should satisfy the Chagosians, that they'll get to go on a visit back to their island?
How can you be a visitor on your own island? Natives that just want to go to pay a tribute for the last time. Mainly when they come back, they became more distraught. Some people, they are happy, and that gives them more determination to claim the island back. Others, when they come back, they struggle to cope because others are enjoying our land, our sea, free houses, whereas here in Britain, we have to pay.
It must be very emotional, because I know that Louis, your father, went on a trip, and he was just a small child when he left the islands. It must be quite an emotional thing to go back and then to leave again, almost as if you're being wrenched out of the island again.
Yes, I understand what my dad is saying. I understand his sorrow, because when he was little, his mum took him to get treatment to Mauritius, and then they were not able to go back home. So for him to be able to go back after so many years, that's what gave me more strength to go back there, because I want to have a sense of belonging. Because right now, I don't understand myself. I don't have an identity of my own. I want my kids to have their own culture, to be able to be free. And freedom is where you are happy. Happiness will be home.
Beautifully expressed, Isabel. This has been a long struggle for the Chagosian people. You've had champions in Parliament. I think of Tam Dael, Jeremy Corbyn, have been people who over the years have championed your cause. Are you hopeful that perhaps this latest decision will provoke more members of Parliament, both in the UK and elsewhere, to rally to the Chagosian standard?
Yes, yeah, because our community is a community of faith, and we've always believed in justice. We firmly believe that justice will be done.
Now, the court case just in the last few weeks, where the British government have been found against in the United Nations and the International Court of Justice. Now, I know, of course, that you're looking to have your own islands, not governed by Mauritius or Britain. But does that give you heart that the international community are saying, look, something very bad happened back in the 60s, and it's time it was put right?
I believe that the Court of Justice did not look into the Chagosian struggle very well. It was more focused about the empire, that is British Empire.
That's a very good point, because International Court of Justice ruling tended to dwell, quite rightly and understandably, on what the Britain had done wrong as part of decolonisation.
Yes.
As opposed to what the indigenous rights of the people might be to self-determination. However, on balance, would you say that court ruling against Britain was a step forward? Yes,
it is a step forward to go on our island. And for that to happen, we need to make the Great Britain to realise that they need to honour the rule of the law, because they might as well ignore it, and we do not want that. We want other nations to back up us, back the Chagosian, and as a Chagosian, we need to go home.
I can't guarantee your return in early coastal islands, although I've got no doubt that you'll win out in the end. But what I can do is present you with the Alex Salmond Quake for appearing in the show. Now, you must have something very similar in the tradition of the Chagosians. It's Scotch whisky, only Scotch whisky in the cup, and then pass it round your many island friends.
Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Now, coming up after the break, we hear more of the Chagosian stories and look at some of the parliamentary champions that islanders have had over the ages. Join us then.
Welcome back. In this episode, we've been looking at the personal stories of the Chagosian community, many of whom have been living in an effective enclave in the towns around Gatwick Airport for the past half-century. Alex takes up the story with Chagos Islander Louis Bertrand-France.
Louis, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Hi, Sam. Alex.
You're a second-generation person from the Chagos Islands who came, your father, your family came to make their life in the UK. In 2016, the United Kingdom government said there'd be £42 million made available to help develop the lifestyle of Chagosians in the UK. What's happened to that £42 million?
Oh, well, Alex, that money doesn't exist. The Prime Minister keeps on repeating it all the time, but it doesn't exist. We haven't seen none of that.
And now, I mean, you're second generation, so you have a British passport, you have the right to remain. But third generation Chagosians, they have no such automatic right, and many people are facing deportation, almost a reverse deportation. Yes. Having been deported and cleared from Chagos Island, now they're facing being deported back to Mauritius. How do you feel about that?
In a way, we are trapped, and nobody's listening. Hopefully now, after the court ruling, United ruling...
How did you feel about the International Court of Justice in The Hague ruling against Britain? Did this give you encouragement when that came out a few weeks ago?
I don't expect tomorrow Theresa May is going to come out and say, oh, there you go, children, go back, you know, it's okay, you know, everything is okay now, sorry for what we did. I'm not expecting that at all. I expect another battle to start.
And can that sense of belonging only be satisfied when the community returns to your island home?
Of course. That sense of belonging is not here at all. There's no sense of belonging there. It's like we are in a wait. We've been in, for 50 years, we've been in a waiting room. For 50 years, we've been waiting. We've been waiting for, how long can you wait? This is a prison sentence, this is a life sentence, this is a lifelong wait.
Well, Louis, I wish you all the best and hope your wait's over. I can't guarantee it, of course, but what I can do is present you with the Salmond Quaich.
Thank you very much.
The Quaich is Scots Gaelic for a loving cup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for appearing in Salmond.
Thank you very much.
Over the years, the islanders have not lacked parliamentary champions. One of the first was the redoubtable Tam Dael, 43 years an MP, and someone who long proclaimed the injustice delivered to Her Majesty's subjects. Then there was a younger Jeremy Corbyn, who laboured long in the backbenches supporting international causes. And then there was this firebrand, who spoke up in favour of the islanders. More recently, the local MPs and an all-party group have taken up the cudgels. However, the government has been largely unmoved, ruling out the return of the Chagosians in 2016, shrugging off last month's ICJ ruling as non-binding. Alex speaks to Paul Monaghan, former MP and Vice Chair of the Chagos Islands Group.
Paul Monaghan, you're a former Vice Chair of the all-party parliamentary group in the Chagos Islands. One thing interests me that I've never met a parliamentarian who wasn't sympathetic to the plight of the islanders. Why is it then that they're unable to combine to force the UK government into addressing its responsibilities?
It's good to be on your show, Alec, and thank you for the invitation. To answer your question, I think I have met some parliamentarians who are not sympathetic to the Chagos Islanders, and in my experience they were both members of the UK government, Mr Duddridge and Mr Duncan. There's been numerous debates in Parliament across the years about the rights, the human rights of the Chagos Islanders, and what is it that's standing in their way of being able to return to their homeland, their islands, and their historic way of life as an Indigenous community. And what is standing in their way has been successive UK governments, both of Conservative and Labour persuasions. And there's no real good reason why the Chagos Islanders can't return to their homeland.
But over the years, there's been some redoubtable parliamentary champions. I mean, yourself, for example, I think of Jeremy Corbyn, Tam Dael, who was probably the first parliamentarian to raise this issue in the House of Commons. So they haven't lacked for a parliamentary voice, but somehow successive governments have been able to deflect the campaigns. Do you see a change coming with this International Court of Justice ruling?
I think the international community now is really looking at the UK thinking, here's a country that has been exposed for a whole series of failures across a huge expanse of time. And I think the pressure really is building up. And eventually the UK government is going to have to act and do something differently.
We can't help draw the contrast between the UK's attitude to the Chagos Islands, to Dere Garcia and the other islands on the one hand, and their attitude to the Falkland Islanders on the other. Where a war was fought to preserve the right of the Falkland Islanders to have the government, or they wished, but the Chagos Islanders were evacuated, evicted, cleared from their islands. How do you explain that contrast between the islanders in the Indian Ocean and the islanders in the South Atlantic?
What I think is different here is that the Chagos Islands themselves, the archipelago of the Chagos Islands, forms what is a unique strategic base for military purposes. That's what's different, and that's what's gone against the Chagos Islanders. And of course, we know the history here shows that the UK government effectively sold out the Chagos Islanders, stole their land, stole their wealth, stole their lives, really, all for a tawdry deal over Polaris nuclear missiles where they saved £11 million, which is about £200 million in today's money. It's about military strategy and it's about military objectives, and it's about the UK effectively providing a base for the US military in the Indian Ocean. That's what it's about.
Now, at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, the United Kingdom were represented by the government's Attorney General, no less. Do you think he was squirming in embarrassment when the documents were extracted from the government, which showed and demonstrated that civil servants, not in the last century or the century before or 200 years ago, but in living memory, were describing islanders as man Fridays? Was he sitting squirming in embarrassment as this started to be extracted of how these islanders were regarded within living memory?
Well, I think he certainly should have been squirming with embarrassment. I mean, as you're alluding, the documents that were exposed at the International Court of Justice show a distinct thread of discrimination, probably even racism, running through the policies of the UK government towards these people. These are the Chagosians are a proud and humble people. They lived on their islands for well over 200 years. They had a distinct society, as a distinct community, and a very successful one. The UK government went in and destroyed all of that in living memory. So here we have, in front of us, an egregious abuse of people's human rights that the UK government is doing absolutely nothing to rectify.
Paul Monaghan, you're joining us from Inverness, and everybody in that part of the world will know what it means to talk about people being cleared from their land. Did you think in this day and age we'd see another clearances, in this case of a defenceless people in the Indian Ocean? And how damaging will it be to the United Kingdom's worldwide reputation when this case is taken to the floor of the United Nations?
Well, you're quite right. I mean, the similarities between the clearances in the Highlands, where the economy of the Highlands was destroyed, people were evicted off their land and they were forced to emigrate all across the world. That's very, very important that we recognise, that we push for restitution, and we make sure that the Chagosians have got that right to rebuild their life, rebuild their homeland, and rebuild the communities that bring something different to the world, just as happened here in the Highlands so many years ago. But again, I'd emphasise, this isn't hundreds of years ago, it's not centuries ago. This is a human rights abuse that's taking place today in our society.
Now, Paul Monaghan, you've met the Chagosians in the UK. I think many people watching this programme will be surprised to find out there's maybe 3,000 people living around Crawley near Gatwick Airport. What sort of jobs do these folk do? How are they settled in the United Kingdom? And what about this issue of third-generation Chagosians being denied the right to stay?
The UK government denying third-generation Chagosians the right to stay in the UK is just absolutely bizarre. We need to remember this is a people that have been forcibly removed from their islands, taken to the UK by the UK government. Typically they have quite humble jobs, quite practical jobs. They have not risen to what we might consider to be the professional ranks, and they have not done particularly well through education. These are generalisations, obviously, Alec. I think the judgment of the International Court of Justice shines a light on all of that, and it particularly shines a light on the fact that these people, these important people, have got an absolute right to return to their island, to develop the economy that they once had, and to live the lives that they once had that are suited to their culture, their personalities, and their aspirations. And that's really what we should be trying to force the UK government to implement, to do the right thing and to let these people go home.
And what about that £42 million that the government promised in 2016 would be available for the development of Chagosian community and society? What's happened to that money?
Well, nothing at all has happened to that money. I'd say again that that 42 million is a drop in the ocean compared with the discounts that the UK government have received against nuclear weapons in the past. The UK government seems to think that it has a right to frankly ignore the Chagosians, make idle promises to them, and then abandon them at the drop of a hat. So the 42 million, it's a reed in the wind, Alec. It's never going to be delivered, and I really don't think the UK government has got any intention of compensating adequately the Chagosians for their loss of life. The Chagosians don't want compensation, I believe. I think what they want is a fair settlement that will allow them to go back to their islands and to have access to what is theirs.
Paul Monaghan from Inverness, thank you for joining us on the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you, Alec.
The Home Office in recent statements have shown no sign of making any concessions to the Chagosians. Under current British nationality law, citizenship is normally only passed on to one generation born abroad. This means that grandchildren of resettled Chagosians do not have a claim to British citizenship. Visa applications are assessed on their individual merits. Meanwhile, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office provided us with the following response to the International Court of Justice ruling. This is an advisory opinion, not a judgment. Of course, we will look at the detail of it carefully. The defence facilities on the British Indian Ocean Territory help to protect people here in Britain and around the world from terrorist threats, organised crime and piracy. Well, not much of a change of heart there then. There's a campaign running for the last few years called Britain is Great, of which the government is very proud. Vast sums of public money are expended in telling the world what a strong, powerful country Britain is. No longer a colonial power, but still very much a force to be reckoned with. It is rather an inconvenient truth, therefore, for the International Court of Justice, with every international judge assenting, with the lonely exception of the American, to serve up a searing indictment of colonial behaviour. And behaviour not rooted in the days of gunboat diplomacy, but within living memory, where native islanders were dismissed as Man Fridays in official documents. The government has airily dismissed the ICJ ruling against Britain as non-binding. And that is true in the sense that no one is going to send a gunboat up the Thames and train its firepower in the House of Commons. But moral force is judged on the force of argument, not on the argument of force. Britain now stands condemned, not just as a country with a colonial past, but one unwilling to make proper reparations in the present, and stands condemned already before the World Court, and shortly, in all likelihood, before the United Nations itself. To deny the third generation of people cleared from their islands a proper home in the UK is miserable, petty and mean-minded, an attitude entrenched as if the Windrush scandal had never happened. And thus, the bitter legacy of colonialism continues to this day. In reality, countries are not judged by the number of warheads and submarines, by the hard power of fleet carriers, by the billions of arms sales, but by the excellence of education, the compassion of social services, their usefulness to the wider international community, and above all, the treatment which the state metes out to the weak and vulnerable. On that test, the Chagosian story portrays Britain not as a great country, but a very small one indeed. So from Alex, me, and all of the team here at the show, it's goodbye for now, and we'll see you next week.